Hey there, this is Dr. Osar, just banging out some lunges here. Lunges are one of those most fundamental patterns that we can do when we're discussing fundamental movement patterns here on our Facebook Live. Let me turn this up a little bit. How are you today? Thank you for being part of our community and allowing us to be part of your community. In this 7-part series, we're discussing the fundamental movement patterns. Some of the ways that we look at these patterns through the lens of the Integrative Movement System. And lunges are one of those patterns. We discussed the squat pattern. We discussed the hip hinge pattern in the last 2 Facebook Lives. Hello, my fellow Integrative Movement Specialist, Stephen Schmolt. How are you, my friend? From Chicago. Good to see you. Thanks for being on. We're discussing lunges today because lunges are basically a hip hinge pattern when they're performed the Integrative Movement System way. And here's what I mean. One of the things that our industry tries to do is improve gluteal function. And how they improve gluteal function is by doing a lot of glute squeezing. So you can do some squats, squeeze at the top. Do your hip thrusters, squeeze at the top. Load it up, squeeze at the top. Whatever you're doing, it's very concentric biased. Meaning like the more load you do, the more you squeeze your glutes, the more you activate the glutes. And that's not really a true statement. I should say it is a true statement. It's not a very functional or practical way to actually improve hip function. Let me explain that. It's not to be controversial. What we need to do to actually load a muscle and activate it appropriately, so make it more functional, is we need to teach the individual how to lengthen the area. So for example, if we're doing a squat pattern, we want to focus on lengthening through the posterior hip complex. That eccentric lengthening then helps promote a more effective concentric contraction. Because if we load the person up appropriately, so if we effectively load the posterior hip complex appropriately, so the glutes, the external hip rotators, the hamstrings, and all the fascial connections back there, then we get a much better concentric contraction. And we don't have to over squeeze the glutes to improve gluteal function. Lunges are no different. So what we want to think about, if you look at the line on our shorts here, we want to teach our clients to load the posterior hip complex. So to load, to sit into the posterior hip complex, so we stretch the posterior hip complex. We also want to make sure the pelvis remains square to the forward leg. So this is what I mean. Here's what a lot of our clients will do if you watch them from behind. And it's why you always have to watch your clients from behind when you're doing lunge or single leg patterns. You'll see a lot of clients come here, and what they're going to do is they're coming down and watch the line on our hands. You'll see the line shift out to the side. You'll see them shift away. And if you're watching from the front view, you'll see them shift away from that lower leg. So they're not maintaining a nice squared pelvis position relative to their lower extremity. So what we want to think about doing is eccentrically loading them, keeping the pelvis square to their forward foot. So when they're going into a reverse lunge, for example, they're keeping the pelvis square. So if you watch the line on my shorts as I do a reverse lunge, it should stay level and parallel to the floor. We should not see deviations this way through the transverse plane. We should not see deviations through the frontal plane or a combination of transverse and frontal plane motion. So it's very important that we're teaching our clients to maintain that thoracolpelvic cylinder so that during a reverse lunge or even a forward lunge is the exact same thing. So we're still loaded into the hip of the forward leg, making sure that pelvis stays squared, not kicking out to the side, not going through that transverse plane and or frontal plane excessive motion. That's how you really help your clients better activate their glutes, get that eccentric loading, improve the centration, the alignment and control of the femoral head in the acetabulum. You take stress off their knees, you take stress off the low back, you load up the hip in an appropriate manner, and the lunge essentially just becomes step-ups or walking lunges, or ultimately the single leg control we need for running. So not exactly the same thing, obviously, but it helps develop that gluteal control of the femoral head in the acetabulum, or the pelvis over top the femoral head, which is really just functional for walking, running, and or any sport movement, and you really teach the client how to use their glutes in an appropriate manner. You decrease the wear and tear on the labrum, as well as their knees, as well as the low back, and you really get much better function. And then you can load them up as much as you want. You can do as many lunges as you want. You can do as deep of a lunge as you want, as the client is able to control their pelvis relative to their lower leg. And that's how you do a lunge, an appropriate lunge. And again, what about the more bodybuilder style lunge, or the big, this is really not a lunge. This is not a lunge right there. That's just a split squat in a very wide stance. Lunge when you're actually lunging forward or doing a reverse lunge back this direction. There's nothing wrong with a split squat. The split squat is really just a prerequisite pattern to the forward and or reverse lunge. So I hope that makes sense. Align the thoracolpelvic cylinder. Make sure your client keeps the pelvis squared to the forward leg. Make sure your client eccentrically loads through their posterior hip complex so they can get deeper into the pattern, so they maintain that pelvis square to that forward leg, and that's how you teach mobility. You maintain mobility, and you're also developing stability and activation of the entire gluteal complex, the entire hip complex in general, and improve your client's function. Hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat, and I'll get back to them at a later date. Make it a great day. Thanks for allowing us to be part of your community and being part of our community. Keep going out there and empowering, educating, and enrolling more individuals into the importance of using you as a coach and really transforming people's lives through the power of optimal movement, optimal breathing, and optimal motor control. Make it a great day. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Next week, we'll cover rotation patterns, and then that's a whole new topic I'm working on for my new book, Corrective Exercise Solutions to Common Hip and Shoulder Problems, or dysfunction, I should say, which cause problems as well. Thanks so much. Have a great day. We'll see you next time here at Discover IMI Integrative Movement Institute. Take care.